What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for Your Overwatch. Today we're going to be talking about a very exciting subject: when Overwatch 2 may be releasing. We're going to be taking a look at a combination of clues and statements made about the game, as well as tracking the decision-making of Activision behind the scenes to help inform our best educated guess of when Overwatch 2 should be coming out. The official public response about the release date so far has been, they don't know, it'll be done when it's done, Blizzard soon, that kind of thing. But I think we have clues that indicate their intentions that can narrow this down further so well that I think I can flat out guess when it's going to be coming out. The first clue is that I think if you take a look at how Jeff Kaplan presented Overwatch 2 last year, trying to sell us on it being a sequel, there was a lot to break down in between the lines. The idea made no sense to PC gamers because adding on new game modes as well as an extra campaign while still building on the live service game itself just made it seem like an expansion. But obviously, Jeff knows that, at least for the PC audience. Instead, he made a huge emphasis on telling players that they didn't want you to feel like your friends would move on with a game that you can't play with them on. This doesn't really happen on PC, but I want to emphasize that it happens all the time for just about every game on console. And when you set it in that frame, all of Jeff's comments about Overwatch being a sequel makes more sense, and I think indicates towards when they want to release the game. It feels impossible to ignore that the end of this year, both of the next-gen consoles are expected to be released. Holiday 2020 is either the publicly announced launch date or the rumored launch date. And now, picture it this way. Overwatch 2 comes out on the next-gen consoles, but attached with the promise that you can play with your friends from Overwatch 1, at least in the old PvP modes. Not only do I think that they're breaking the tradition of sequels not carrying over, I also assume that they're talking about cross-generational play, if not more cross-play in general. If you follow the technology of the next-gen Xbox Series X, it's actually been kind of confusing because really they're selling it like it's a PC and a non-essential upgrade, actually, where they're going to still be developing games for the Xbox One, but the Series X will essentially just be an upgraded version of them, and you can play those games on either system. If that's the case, well, it's just like we're on a PC then, where games scale up and down, which is what makes developing for PCs harder, obviously, but maybe that's just the norm with consoles now. Before you think I'm crazy in assuming that this is going to be the case, imagine if Jeff said that, knowing that the next-gen consoles are coming, and then couldn't fulfill that promise because next-gen couldn't play with last-gen. Like, in order for that to make any sense, they would also have to release Overwatch 1 for the next-gen, and that doesn't seem to make any sense either. There's no way that Overwatch 2 isn't a next-gen game. Why else did they go through the graphical overhaul and upgrade it? It would seem like a waste, or the biggest development fail of all time if Overwatch 2 was only a current gen game and isn't coming to next gen. I will admit, my theory kind of falls apart if that's the case, but it's such a dumb move that I don't think that's going to happen. Instead, I think that Activision Blizzard is going to be setting to attempt to launch Overwatch 2 near and around the launch date of the next-gen consoles, at least in that window. And a lot of my content creator friends agree with me that this seems to be the most obvious move. This doesn't mean that it necessarily comes out exactly at the launch, but importantly, it would need to come out in the primetime window before everyone spends their money on holiday gifts, as in November, as opposed to 2021. It all seems to line up. And yes, Jeff has said that they have no release date in mind. It's sort of a when it's done situation, Blizzard soon possibly. But I think if you look at the actions that Activision has been taking in the past year to manage Blizzard a bit more strictly than it's been in the past, I don't think they'd be very happy at missing that key launch window. Let's take a look at some clues that help me build that conclusion. It was fairly well known that Activision sort of brutally downsized last year in an attempt to operate more lean and rake in bigger profit. But one aspect of this big changeover that I don't think was as highly publicized as the layoffs was, in exchange for letting go of so many employees, they also brought on many developers in order to increase the rate of development of their major IPs and push out more games out the door. Old Blizzard was kind of happy never releasing new IP, basically, or spending years and years down the drain on Project Titan, which was scrapped before the big success of Overwatch. And I'm fairly certain, based on all of the actions of Activision, they don't want that type of thing to happen again. They want surefire hits, crank out the sequels, give us Diablo 2, give us more Overwatch games, and fast. They want to return on their investment. You can talk about the evils of a big corporation all you want, but they're looking to tighten things up and produce things down an assembly line a bit more than the sort of less strenuous, more artistic approach that Activision Blizzard had before, or more so the Blizzard side of that. And let me ask you, why would they ramp up developers to crank out games faster if it wasn't to reach this type of deadline? If they were just going to release anytime next year, well, maybe they wouldn't need to invest the extra money to get it done quicker. No, I think it's pretty clear that they want to hit key deadlines to maximize profits, especially when you take a look at how they've ran their other franchises. And with that evidence, not only do I think that this is the launch window for the game, I think they'll also set Overwatch 1 to go free to play when they launch Overwatch 2. Okay, let's look at a few reasons for this. Just at the game itself. From the onset, Jeff said they're letting everyone play together anyway. And with the new product coming out, they want you to buy that new sequel. But the sequel entirely devalues Overwatch 1 because you get everything you would have got in Overwatch 1 in the sequel anyway. So why would you ever, as a new player, play the first one? It would either need to go on a heavy discount to make any sense, but that makes less sense than the massive profits they could get in pushing it free to play, with Overwatch 1 sales sort of tapering off around the 50 million mark. I mean, how many more sales can they even get? At this point, anyone who hasn't bought it yet probably isn't going to buy it. So now the smart business decision would be to open it up free to play just for the PvP side of the game and rake in lots of new players into the loot box system to increase their microtransactions earnings. And I think by any estimate, making that move would make far more money than a discounted version of Overwatch 1. If they did this, they'd be able to have their cake and eat it too, which is exactly what they do with Call of Duty. Have the mainstream game that is a product boxed full price, but also bring in the free-to-play audience with microtransactions. Activision didn't always like this strategy. With last year's Call of Duty, Black Ops 4, it and Blackout were behind a paywall, despite not having any single-player campaign. Different story for a different day. But with Modern Warfare and Warzone, they are doing this sort of two-tiered product approach where Warzone is free-to-play and has 60 million players already, and in the first quarter of 2020 alone has earned $1 billion in microtransactions. Holy cow. Overwatch 2's model has the opportunity to emulate that same success. And why wouldn't Activision want to try to do that with Overwatch, at least, with Call of Duty being sort of its flagship product right now? And as far as I'm concerned, by all indications, this is the direction that Overwatch 2 as a game is intended to go. I think a lot of onlookers were a bit disinterested in what was revealed at last year's BlizzCon for Overwatch 2. It looked like a spruced up special mission, but not the full game that we were being promised. However, I think when you piece apart very key quotes that Aaron Keller and Jeff Kaplan had disclosed at the Q&A panels about the game, the scope of what they're attempting to do with Overwatch 2 is far more akin to Diablo 3, and if they're successful in that, the Overwatch IP could have the best of both worlds. We didn't see this thus far in the gameplay reveals of Overwatch 2, but the devs were explaining that they're looking to have it be endlessly replayable with deep and complex systems. So there's going to be builds or things to unlock, reasons to grind. We know that Blizzard does these things correctly. They have World of Warcraft and Diablo are massive hits. I think some people don't realize because as PC gamers, the reputation of Diablo 3 was not very good at launch, but by the time they put TLC into the game, fixing it up, Loot 2.0, an expansion pack, and a port to consoles that was just stellar, Diablo 3 became one of the best-selling games of all time at 30 million copies sold. Now, Overwatch 1 beats it out with 50 million, but you can see how it just seems like a no-brainer to combine these strategies to try to make the push for their new product. And I think that's absolutely the best way in order to maximize the profits for Activision. And why wouldn't they do that call for Overwatch as well. It's going to maximize profits there too, where you get the players in the door for the mainstream appeal reasons to play the campaign and have the co-op missions and everything and grind like they do in Diablo. But after sort of maximizing the sales that you could expect them to be able to achieve with the Overwatch 1 as a box product, now it's time to rake in the even bigger net and invite them into the Overwatch scene as well. Of course, there is a chance that all my assumptions here are incredibly wrong. You can't expect companies to either be capable based on just production alone. Like, let's say if the game isn't done, I don't want them to push it out the door, right? But I have a sneaking suspicion that the build we saw at BlizzCon was not the most up-to-date version of the game. I think that's a much earlier version, which is pretty common for game studios nowadays to show you, like, I don't know, 3 builds ago. It's very common for the Blizzard development process to clue us into things like a year after they've been already developing it. I think you can even think about things that have been added to the Overwatch 1 game. It seems like the devs are silently working away at things for months and months and maybe years, and then all of a sudden we get a massive new feature out of the blue without much build-up. And they do that so that they don't overpromise and underdeliver. They'd rather underpromise and overdeliver. But when you do that too many times, I think that you can expect them to be attempting that strategy yet again here with Overwatch 2. I think even by BlizzCon last year, there was a lot more built into the game that we didn't get to see yet. And instead, they showed the press and everyone at BlizzCon a sliver of the game that they were 100% sure was going to stay, but there might be much, much more already done. Escalated even further by them adding lots more devs in order to help out the process. So what now? Let's say I'm correct in my assumption that Overwatch 2 is going to be a holiday console next-gen release window game. I think there's a pretty good chance that we'll be hearing some news about an Overwatch 2 beta fairly soon, because if that was the release date they were shooting for, they probably want a few month beta beforehand on the PC to get things ironed out. Keep in mind, the Overwatch 1 beta was very long and lasted from October 2015 and ended on the next year, May 9th, 2016, to then fully launch only a couple weeks later on the 24th in May. And hey, May, that's the month we're in now. Overwatch's anniversary event will be right around the corner in a few months, and that would be a very opportune time to celebrate and move us forward to the next game. There may be a bigger announcement alongside it or coming up soon. I don't suspect Overwatch 2's beta to be nearly as long as Overwatch 1, because remember, they built an entirely new game and had tons of things to bug test. Meanwhile, they've been developing Overwatch 2 alongside Overwatch 1, and in many ways it is an expansion, so because of that, there might not need to be much of a beta, if one at all, really. You would think that the sequel's tech is going to be much more similar to the one we already have and not need as much testing to get it done. So we may see even a beta coming up soon or in the fall in anticipation for that holiday launch that a lot of us think is definitely coming. And I can't think of a better time than the 4th year anniversary of Overwatch to celebrate. What do you guys think? Is this just a crazy conspiracy theory video? Am I thinking way too hard about these things? Let me know in the comment section down below. But if you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and hit the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. Link in the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news updates and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.